Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the IJK Podcast. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Denis Lledo. Denis works for Criteo as a Products R&D Finance Partner in the Paris office. Prior to joining Criteo, Denis has worked at Google for 11 years as a Senior Financial Analyst, covering the Europe, Middle East, and Asian markets. Throughout his 15 years of experience, Denis has become an expert of Google products and the ads ecosystem, and his specialties include financial analysis, cost control, project management, and of course ESG, our topic today. ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Corporate Governance. Today we'll be exploring with Denis the financial equation of ESG and sustainability. Denis, welcome and very happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Emad. I'm happy to be here with you today. Just letting you know, it's my first podcast, so I hope people will appreciate.
I'm sure they will. Let's start with a very basic and obvious question. Could you please start by explaining what ESG stands for and why it's become a critical part of the financial world in recent years?
Yes. So as you already mentioned, ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Corporate Governance. It's really a finance thing. That's where it's been created, and that's where people really use it and look at it. The first thing I think is to go back in time and let people know that this is not really something new. That's something that started way back, I would say at least early 20th century. You already had finance funds looking at this thing and saying, oh, we want to be a bit different. We want to invest on things that are not only business, but that include some of these criteria that are more looking for the overall wealth or the future of mankind and doing things right. Okay, so that's where things start for me. It's early 20th century. In the US, you see the first funds. But it's not something that has really spread out. Mm-hmm. In Europe, things start a bit later, like I would say like in the 80s, 1980s. But again, something very niche, as you see in a lot of different businesses. Like you want to differentiate yourself and you want to propose to your customer something a bit different, and that way you can get a different business. So that's also how it starts in Europe. But things start to really become standardized around after the 2010 and so on. That's where those matters really become top of mind and people start to really think about things like climate change. I think that's the main driver that out of all the ESG components, like the first one, the environmental one, is the one that gets most attention. So around the early 2000s, that's when things really start to take off, and little by little, like the media, the press brings all those topics forward. Climate change being the most important one. You also have things like corporate governance in there, and that will make reference to things like what happened to Enron. This bankruptcy and how we didn't detect this kind of issues and how important it is to have a good governance. So all those past experience build up the criteria that we will discuss later and bring that to the front scene. I would say Europe now is leading on this area. From 2021, I think the European Commission issued an act stating that all European funds need to report on those topics. So it's like the evolution of all the financial standards. Like for a long time, people didn't have to report on anything. Then we decided that we need to put some boundaries to the stock market and so on. And we asked everyone to publish their accounts every 3 months and so on. So it's a bit the same. Now in Europe, funds need to say these are the companies we're investing on, and this is the kind of ESG structures or commitments that they make. So in Europe, we have that kind of regulatory framework to comply with. In the US, it's still not the case, but it's still appealing over there. You have investors there that care about these matters, so the products come to market. So it's becoming more and more like a vanilla topic. You have more and more business, as we will see later, more and more funds being steered on that direction.
Cool. Just from my understanding, you said that in Europe, there's already guidelines and a regulatory framework for this, but in North America, it's still not the case, correct?
Yes. That's my
understanding. Okay. One more question. You mentioned those financial controls that happened after 2000 when, with the with Enron and all the big financial crashes that happened after the dot-com era. Are those controls like SOX, for example, are those ESG guidelines or controls part of that, the same initiative, or that's something a bit different?
I would say, given that those SOX controls, for instance, are standard, are mandatory, that's the standard, so everyone complies with them. So you really don't need to score people on that because everyone has to do it.
Yes.
I think that is the next level, and I think we'll talk about it later, but at some point I will expect all this to become the standard, and everyone will do this, and we won't really talk about this in the way we're doing it today. It would be business as usual for everyone. These are the things we have to do, and we have to comply with.
Excellent.
But right now it's still a bit open and I would say that optional in most cases.
Understood. Okay. Could you elaborate on the differences between E, S, and G factors and talk a bit about the respective significance of these elements in the corporate landscape, please?
So the significance depends on each individual, each corporate, each fund. But what I can say that in general, people care most about the E component, the environmental one. Mm-hmm. What does that include? That includes things like how does the company use resources? How much does it pollute? Is it using toxic products? What do they do with them? How much CO2 are we emitting? Are we using water? What are we doing with the water we're using in our production? Are the buildings the company is using or building green? All these kind of things, okay? What kind of technologies we're using, like are we generating energy? If you're comparing two energy suppliers, one is producing with coal, the other one is producing solar energy. It's not the same, so what type of technologies we're using. So all those components, and I would say the most standardized or the one that people care the most about at the moment is the CO2 emission. But it's not only about CO2. It's about anything that is environmental related. So water, air, toxic products, and so on. Okay. So you can say a nuclear plants, they don't emit CO2, but there are very toxic materials in there. So they will not get such a high score on the environmental part as a solar one, for instance. And even the solar one, you need to build the solar panels or the mirrors to reflect the light to the central tower and so on. So each one will be assessed on exactly what they're using and how. So that's the environmental part, the part that people care the most about. Mm-hmm. Then the social. The social is a bit like we're French. I'm French at least. I don't know if you got the French nationality. Did you?
No. But I did my studies in France and I worked in France, so I am somewhat French in my education, at least.
I am French. I'm Spanish. I'm more Spanish than French, but I also have my French nationality. So yes, France is the country of the human rights, let's say. And this social part, it's a lot about that, about how we treat people, making sure there's equality across the company, that there is a good relationship and and let's say equal balance of forces between the employees, the directors, and so on. So also about the safety of the workplace. Like I would say, like a few 100 years ago, people didn't care about the safety in the workplace. Like you had workers dying in construction. Say, well, that's normal.
It's part of the job.
Only two. A few years ago, it was 10. Like that doesn't happen anymore, and I don't think that people talk about that much anymore because
it's a given.
Exactly. Now it's everywhere. Okay, so it's
taken for granted.
At top of mind, but it's clearly it's critical. Okay, but it's in there, like human rights. Like, does the company work with another country, let's say, or other companies that don't comply with human rights? Or do you have suppliers, let's say, I don't know, in North Korea or in China that do things that have kids working?
Yeah.
But if you make sure you state in your policies that you fight against that whenever you have a vendor, you check for these things, you ask them to really prove the way they work. They don't have a child labor and these kind of things. That will give you a higher score than if you just keep doing your business, don't do anything special, and have deals with almost everyone. That's in there. Or just not working on very controversial topics or areas like tobacco, let's say, alcohol, these kind of things.
Yes.
Not very well seen. So if you work on those areas, you will have a lower score than if you don't. Okay?
Okay.
Also, the kind of policies that you have internally against bias, let's say, when you hire.
Equal opportunity hiring.
Exactly, opportunity hiring, or ensuring that people don't hire based
from a particular background or from particular race or.
Exactly. So you can just say, oh, in my company, we erase the names of all the people we want to hire, because that may give you an indication of where they come from, what they've done, and so on. These are the kind of things that are scored there. Okay, that's the social part, which is the least, let's say, discussed, or the least.
Is it? But the recent.
The first one is the environmental one. Then there's the corporate governance that is more critical for investors, because this is really in the finance world. So really investors, they care a bit more about how your board operates or your anti-corruption or anti-bribery rules, rather than just ensuring that there are no bias in your...
I understand what you mean. So from an investor perspective, you're saying that they care mostly about the governance part rather than the social one, for example.
Exactly. Okay. So on the corporate governance part, that's where you have like executive compensation, for instance. Are you paying your executives fairly? Yes, they have these salaries, but are they earning 1 million times the value of the lowest employee in your company? That wouldn't look very good. Or if it's just a factor of 10, when you say, oh, look, it's very fair, it's very narrow factor. So you look at these things.
How are these rules set? Is it like looking at the market benchmarks or doing some analysis and some statistics? How the compensation schema should work? How is it usually done?
So it's a bit like on the credit scoring. Like every credit company, we create their own score, and we say, this is what you need to achieve so that I give you a top grade, and this is what you get if you are below. Okay, so I don't think there is any specific formula for all of them.
Okay.
They would look at, for instance, for gender parity. It's rather easy. You say, what's the 50-50 and so on. But you could decide also to balance that. I don't think you can ask for gender parity to a company in the tech industry where you know that out of school, only 20% of the engineers are female. So if you
I understand.
try to hit 50% there,
So they take into consideration those nuances.
Indeed. And for others, yes, they'll probably look at what's the snapshot today of, let's say, workplace benefits and say, oh, this is the top one company. This is the 50th percentile of what we see today. And they will probably do the scoring based on that. Okay. But in the end, each company does its own.
So that's we covered also the government.
So yes, there are probably other factors that I didn't mention, but yes, it's pretty broad. There are no standards yet about this.
Okay. Can we talk a bit about some success stories that are known in the market or case studies of companies that have actually, integrated those ESG principles and have, in a way?
Yes and no. I'm a bit reluctant to say, oh yes, this company is a success because they are good in ESG. I think that's a shortcut that is probably not totally fair. Okay. If you look at a lot of successful companies, yes, they care about ESG and they do effort and they talk about it. But is it the driver of all these other metrics, success metrics that they claim about? That's where the causality effect is not clear to me. Okay.
I mean, rather, let's rephrase it differently. Could we consider one or two companies in the world that are doing well ESG and that, in a way, present a template of success on ESG in particular?
Yes, what people tend to agree on is that when you work on ESG, when you publish because the important thing for me in the end is that when you talk about these topics, you say where you want to go, what you want to achieve. Like I was saying, is an engineering company going to say, I want 50% of my workforce being male and female? Probably not, because it's not a reflection of really what the universities can provide. So, but they can say, today I'm at 20%, probably I want to do 25. And maybe in 5 years' time, if there are more female engineers coming out of the schools, I can push that a bit higher. Okay. So they will say, that's where I want to go. I want to reduce my carbon emissions by that much. One interesting example that we both know is Google. Google has said, by 2030, I want to be carbon neutral. So they want to say my net CO2 emissions are going to be zero. Okay. How do they get there? They say, I'm going to work on the actual emissions I create today, mostly through data centers, and I'm going to reduce them. I'm going to have better power usage, better cooling, and so on. I'm going to reduce those emissions. But I'm still going to emit. Yes, because all activities create emissions. But they want to then cancel those emissions through other projects, through other credits that they can buy, and so on, to be net zero in the end. That's a very good goal. Okay, we can only say, yes, you are big, you have the financial strength to be able to go for that. Mm-hmm. So let's do it. And they're doing pretty well. They're doing pretty well.
A big company like Google, who relies on data centers, and we know that data centers emit a lot of carbons in the atmosphere and heat, I guess. How can a company like Google usually go about reducing that emission? What can they do? Is it more a technological advancement?
Yeah. So the data center themselves, they don't emit.
They don't emit. Okay.
No. Okay. Unless most of them have emergency diesel generators. So
yes,
there's a power blackout. Then those generators will turn on and they will burn diesel. Otherwise, they just take the power that comes through the normal network. So normally they don't emit directly, but obviously building them emits a lot, and then operating them, as you were saying, emits a lot, because that electricity that they are using, mostly for cooling, because that's the key consumption. It's the cooling. It consumes more than the actual machines. That's where they can work. And there are a lot of technologies that are being deployed and tested to improve that. And a very good example is Microsoft. Okay, Microsoft already started, I think, 2016, 17. They already tested some underwater data centers. So like
underwater,
wow. big tanks that you put on the ocean, and then you have some cable going out, and much easier to cool it when it's at, let's say, 10 degrees all the time, and you can just move the seawater around rather than having it on build a building on the land and just take some air conditioning around. So
pretty interesting.
Microsoft is another company that is doing pretty well. And
can we assume that most tech companies, big tech, should be doing well because of the nature of their businesses?
Yes. So Google is doing pretty well. Advertising market has been pretty strong. Things have moved online. So is it ESG? I cannot say it's ESG driving Google's success. I would say probably I don't think it's ESG driving it, but I think it contributes. And it's a good thing because those are the leaders in their industries. They are the ones that have more bandwidth and more room to kind of tackle that and be like the examples. Like, you need people to be the first movers and show everyone else how things can be done, even if in the short term it can incur a financial loss. Okay, so I think they're doing well. What I want to add is, in terms of success, what people tend to report is three things. It's customer satisfaction moving up. Like, when they have customers and they say, hey, you're working with us, but we're doing this. I'm letting you know that with your money, we improve our data centers, or we could pollute less and so on. So those customers tend to be happier. Like, I prefer to be working with someone that does that rather than someone that doesn't do it. The other thing that they tend to report on as well is like employee engagement. Like, same, I'm an employee for Google. I'm proud. I'm happy that my company is doing those efforts rather than being an employee of a company that doesn't really care about that. Okay. So they also tend to say that employee engagement goes up. And lastly is shareholder value. Sometimes you see there are some announcements around ESG, and there is a reflection on the
share prices.
Okay, but that will bring us to a topic later where I want to say that companies, they try to align ESG principles and good business. So an example could be, but Microsoft hasn't deployed those underwater data centers yet. Okay, but I was reading, I think, very recently that some Chinese companies, they have started to really roll out the same kind of principle in China. And if you go out there and say, hey, my company is now doing this, it has a good ESG impact, but at the same time, I have less data center costs because I'm consuming less power, and I don't need to buy land anymore. I don't need to construct buildings and this kind of stuff. Probably you're getting a better ROI on that investment, and on top you are being net positive in your ESG component. So when you align both, that's when you get the best results.
Okay, I understand. So a part of data centers, what are other areas where a company operating in the digital sector could be doing ESG initiatives, like a part of data centers?
All of them. Like when you look at the environmental part, like all the supply chain, for instance. Like digital companies, they also buy servers. Okay, yes. So who do I buy my servers from? Should I take HP? That is a better ESG supplier than someone else, let's say.
Okay.
So you can do it that way. Or when you look at your CO2 emissions, like my people, how do my people travel? And that, I would say that part, Google is probably not a good pupil. Internal travel, do people need to travel that much? You and I know that Google people used to travel a lot.
Cost control.
Exactly. You do more Zoom, you read, or I was saying Zoom, but anywhere like video conferencing, you can save a lot of travel and a lot of emissions. So you can do a lot.
Dennis, is data privacy part of the ESG equation in one area or another?
I would say it can fit in there. I don't think it is a principle that any rating agency uses, but
For example,
it has an impact on people's lives.
exactly. It has an impact on the social part, right?
Yes,
So, for instance, if a company declares that they have a clear data policy or data retention policy versus a company that doesn't, clearly there is a difference.
Exactly.
On some level.
Indeed.
And probably more so in Europe. I think in North America, they are yet to catch up on what's happening in Europe. But in Europe with the GDPR, I guess,
Indeed.
and all these new guidelines that are being enforced in a way, is there like an opportunity for ESG work or ESG improvements?
Indeed. I think you can communicate on that. And I can give you an example of Criteo, the company where I work now. They do a lot of retargeting. That's
their core business, right?
Exactly. People say, "Oh, it's bad. I'm being tracked," and so on. But the Criteo way of doing it is much better than how the rest of people, most of the others do, because the way Criteo works, they track those cookies and those individuals, but they never store any data about the actual individual. It's just those identifiers. So Criteo will not know if you're a male, a female, old, young. They will not know. Like a lot of the other players there, I can mention Google or Meta, where you work within their what we call walled gardens. So you log in and you've given all your information there. They know exactly who you are. They know your age, your gender, what you liked, what you've browsed, and so on. Twitter really doesn't. So I think they can really build on that. And I think they tried, but people didn't get that message that clearly.
Are other platforms trying to copy what Criteo is doing, like being agnostic regarding?
The answer is no, because cookies are going away. So it's a new world that is coming in front of us.
Yes. And can you actually, maybe this is a side note, can you like briefly explain, we hear constantly now this term, cookies are going away, but they will be replaced by what?
Exactly. So before getting into that, I want to say cookies are going away. That's a decision of browsers. Okay.
Okay.
And in also in technology, because when we move to the mobile world, to the smartphones, people change the way they browsed, and they don't browse that much on the web browsers anymore. But on the smartphones, they do it more on apps, and on apps didn't have cookies, so we already had to adapt in some way there. Okay, right. But still, most of the activity was still happening on the web browsers, and that's where the cookie sentiment and the cookie story comes from. So cookies are a good thing in general, I would say. They help the websites keep track, and they avoid asking you all the time for your logins and to get back your settings and all this kind of stuff. So that's what we call first-party cookies. So it's when the website itself stores that information in your computer to recognize you when you're back and personalize the things for yourself. That's, let's say, the good use. I don't think nobody is scared or complains about it. People were complaining about third-party cookies, which is on those same websites, it was a third party that was putting those cookies in your computer to track you also when you were going to another website and really following you through the whole path. Okay? Is it good or bad? Personally, I think the concept is rather good. It helps monitoring and adjusting things for the user, but if it's not used properly, yes, you can track people and it can be a bit scary. Then the first ones, Apple said, we're going to remove them because there was no value for them there. So if they can improve privacy for their customers, why wouldn't they do it? So it was positive PR and so on, no negative impact for them, so they did it. Then came Firefox, Microsoft. The last one that was still around was Google. They had the largest web browser share. I don't remember exactly how much, but I think it's around 60%.
Okay.
So though they had a more complicated call to do that, that's why they're the last one, and it's been taking so long. Because if they do it, like they completely kill a market, let's say, and they need to find out how to replace that, and they can be attacked for a monopolistic approach and anti-competitive behavior and this kind of stuff. In the end, they decided that it was the right thing to do. I still wonder if it's the only reasoning for them there, because by doing that, they also push more of the revenue, more of the advertisers to those walled gardens that they own. Like, they keep knowledge of what you do through the browsers, and they keep knowledge of what you do through the logins. So they were not that dependent on cookies. Other people were. But they made the call for one reason or the other, or maybe both of them that were good for them. They did it. At least they have been kind of open in the way that they wanted to approach it, giving solutions for new technologies to appear and giving time to test them.
And is privacy any concern in all that? Is privacy any factor that those companies have considered to pull out from cookies, or it's mainly just because people are moving to apps rather than browsers?
No. People are using apps more, but browsers are still very heavily used.
Okay.
So it's the privacy component. Okay. That is the official reason. There could be others, but we will not discuss that. But yes, for that privacy component, we need to find new ways of doing things. Okay. And what Google is proposing, so there have been a lot of back and forth and so on, and they still need to test it next year. And ideally, if the competition authorities allow it, it will go live second half of next year. No, next year. This year already.
So 2020, second half of 2024.
Yes. Okay. But yes, so basically what they want trying to prevent is that you really track an individual. Okay?
Yes.
So they want to group them. They want to say, oh, look at, we have millions and millions of people browsing on a given website. You may have on a given day 1,000 people, and the ideas are, let's categorize these people. Let's say the person that has come here, I know through their browsing history, and this happens only on the browser, so it's not exported anywhere else, that the browser has categorized these people like a fashion lover.
Okay.
So you have information about already a category, let's say. Okay. Or you'll have an information about what kind of websites have been visited previously. News, is it sports? And with that, you can try to infer and give them a more precise advertising that just randomly, like we do on TV, like, TV is not random either, but when you say I'm advertising on a football game, you know that not everyone there is going to be interested in men's shaving machines, but it's mostly hands, so I'm doing it there. So you want to be more precise. We're going to lose precision for sure.
Yes.
How much? That's the key question.
Okay.
And I think that's it. So there are going to be new solutions appear. That's always like the game. Like people will innovate and see how this works, and they will add new twists and a lot of the efforts. But I'm not sure they have paid off, or will pay off. Is that people were trying to create those globally common standardized identifiers, so that you could, again, a bit like the Criteo idea of I want to be able to track you, but without really knowing that you are Ayman.
I see.
I want to know things, but so setting up these standards, like the Trade Desk was advocating for one. There are other companies as LiveRamp, like they have their own IDs, and they probably plan to sell them in the end. So those will happen.
Okay. It's going to be an interesting sector for sure. And then it's going to be interesting to see how things will evolve, and if we are going to move to a standardized way when it comes to, privacy and a unified guideline, maybe. What I know for sure is in North America, they're becoming increasingly serious about privacy by copying the European model. I know that in California, for example, in the US, they are almost adopting the same main lines, maybe not the rest of the US. In Canada, for example, here, Quebec is also trying to be more strict about data privacy and all that. But there's still I think we're a few years behind what you guys already have in Europe. Okay, now let's move to a different topic within ESG for sure, and let's talk a bit about financial metrics in specific. So my question is, does ESG investing impact traditional financial metrics like risk, return, and volatility? And are there any trade-offs that investors are facing usually?
It's a bit the same answer as before with the success stories.
With the
success stories,
with the success stories. Okay.
Can you claim is really linked to ESG? Probably not. What I can tell you is that there are these ESG funds, investors say, I want to buy your fund, but only if your ESG components are of a certain degree. And you can compare how those funds perform versus normal funds that don't have these requirements. And then you can see that for 2020, 2021, in general, ESG funds didn't perform better. Lately, they seem to be. Is that forecasting future performance? No. But I think that at some point, most of the companies, most of the funds will be ESG, because there'll be more requirements like in Europe. And in the end, this will become like a vanilla standard. And just everyone will do it. And you will not be able to compare because there will not be really anything else than ESG companies. Okay.
There are criticisms of ESG for sure. And one criticism is that ratings and disclosures that companies do may not be entirely accurate or transparent. So they say that some rating agencies have been accused of oversimplifying complex issues into simple scores. Any thoughts on that?
I'll come back to my previous quote about Enron.
Yes?
Yes, auditors were there. The company was hiding things. And for ESG, the same. You have companies that will say, "Oh, look at what we're doing on ESG," but in practice, they don't really do. So they say, "Oh, look, my policy about gender equality or equal pay, those are my things." But until someone really gets in there and really can see that and check all that and check, it's so you can always lie. I think at some point it will explode, and you will see, oh, these guys were lying, and then
it'll backfire.
They will pay the high price. But I think in general people tend to be authentic, and those matters are not.
Well, in business, we've seen so many different practices.
We have, but I would say in general, like most companies will really declare their values. And declare their goals and so on. And I don't know if I was saying earlier, but the best solution and the way companies approach this at the moment, or most of them, is like, where can I find the win-win situation? Where can I invest in something that is good for my ESG PR, my ESG scores, and at the same time it's good for business? Because in the end, what investors care the most is business.
Yes, so exactly.
For data centers, we were talking about earlier, like investing in any kind of technology that decrease your power consumption, your building costs, and so on. It is fantastic. You win on both sides. Okay,
but could you also lose? My question is, like, sometimes could the trade-off be negative? Like, let's take the example of fuel, for example. If we have a company that is currently using fossil fuels, and at a very cheap cost. Asking that company to switch to non-fossil to a non-fossil alternative could be very costly and could kill the profits. That was my kind of initial thought when I asked you that question.
A very good example is fossil fuel company that say like in France is Total or Exxon. These guys, it's their business, and people say, stop selling fuel and stop drilling holes and so on.
Yeah,
if they do it, there's no business at all, and also a lot of the mankind depends on them, at least for the short and mid-term, so they just cannot do that. But they can still do things, and people shout at them, complain about those companies existing, what they do. But when they report and say, Total, for instance, the French company, now become Total Energy. Like they are refocusing themselves into the energy world. It's not
the more general term. Okay.
They will invest also in solar plants, in
alternative
mills and so on. So they can still do good things without really completely walking away of the items that don't look very good on the ESG scale. At some point, I'm pretty sure they will. That's for sure. At some point, but it will take time. I think we should not be like very drastic here and force things from one day to the other, like what these global conferences, the COP, it's called Conference of the Parties, they do every year. Like they have long timelines. The last one, there was a lot of discussion saying, should we just ban fossil fuels? In the end, they didn't, because they realized it's still going to be needed somewhere, somehow. So be progressive. We don't want to walk out of them for the most part, but don't be saying, I need to ban it today or tomorrow. Okay.
And for sure, it is becoming a political issue as well. We hear a lot of political and business leaders that are even criticizing ESG in a way. So, for instance, Elon Musk recently said that ESG is a scam. That's his words. And he said that it has been weaponized by phony social justice warriors. What do you think about that?
I think that it's not a scam. I think
for sure it isn't. But
I think that he also
why do people say? Why do some important figures, ignore or don't agree that there is global warming, for example, or that ESG is not really useful for business? Why do you think there is this mindset?
So there's also always the complot theory. There's always people saying
conspiracy theory. Yeah,
conspiracy. I say, there needs to be something weird behind all this. The extremes are always bad. Elon Musk is trying to go to Mars. He wants to colonize Mars, and he knows that we need the resources that are there, and that there are a lot of challenges on our planet. So I'm pretty sure he doesn't think that global warming is a conspiracy. But if you put ESG without measure, like saying, I need to impose something and say everyone needs to follow that, we need to stop the fossil fuels tomorrow, that's going to be very bad. It's like when you are very drastic, and that can create a lot of issues, and you need to be more progressive. So if you start talking only about these matters and you forget about your business, you're gonna go back.
That's the other extreme. Yes,
exactly. I spend my time talking about how I change my pollution impact, like we were saying with the fuel companies. If they stop drilling tomorrow, it's again like their value goes down very, very rapidly. So you need to be progressive. Like this is
it's gonna take time, and it's a gradualistic movement.
Rather, it's good to bring it top of mind. Like I was saying, my vision is that in some years this will not be a topic anymore, because it will be standard. Everyone will be
commonplace,
be normal, and nobody will really challenge it. But now it's like, it's very innovative or different, but we cannot only talk about that. There are the pure business, the core business, which you need to keep thinking about it, and even I would say first core business, and then when you have a bit more room to do other things, think about these topics. And that's why these big companies, these big techs, Googles and so on, they have the muscle to tackle these topics. That's why they need to be like the thought leaders on this area. Or
how do you see, sorry to interrupt. How do you see those big companies, big tech mainly, and maybe other big players, big conglomerates? How do you see them leading or changing the face of the ESG landscape in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think it's going to be very fast, or things are going to take more time, or on the contrary, we are on the brink of an ESG revolution?
I think it's going to be very fast. I think it's already there for all of them. Mm-hmm. All those companies have teams dedicated to that, to thinking about that.
They didn't have these teams like 10 years, 5 or 10 years ago.
No. Okay. So now they have these dedicated teams working on these topics, trying to identify like what can we push, how can we do the PR, what projects internally, how we can communicate to our employees, this kind of stuff. So they have people now dedicated to that. It's a cost. Okay. But it's already there. And you already see the impact, the results, how this topic has become top of mind to all the employees in those companies, to a lot of the investors, to a lot of the society in general. So I don't think it's going to be a new revolution, because I think the revolution is already here. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just going to normalize, and it's going to become the standard that we were suggesting before. And yes, people like Google have their targets in 6 years' time. So it's not very, very far down the road, but they need to be the ones showing the path. In order to have everyone being there, then it's not 5 years, it's probably 30 or 40. Okay. But you cannot be very strict, as I was saying. Like if you look at Europe, I think Europe is a bit playing with fire. Because you have Europe in the middle that cares a lot about these topics, that pushes a lot of regulation about all that. But then on the other side...
But regulation is a good thing, isn't it?
If it's well done, yes. And most of the time it's needed. But when I say it's well done, you should not be on the extreme. You should not really say, I want to ban things from one day to the other. Okay? The example of combustion engine cars in Europe, banned by 2035.
Really?
Yes.
They will be banned by 2035?
Yeah, 2035, 35.
Yeah, which is in 10 years.
Yes,
11 years.
You will not be able to go to the deal to the dealership and say, I want to buy an internal combustion engine car. No, they will not sell it anymore.
Okay. So you will have to have an EV.
Exactly. Or hydrogen.
But why not give the choice to people? Why? Because some people still like.
I'm a bit skeptical about it. I would. If I were them, I would not have completely banned them. But there, it's a very strong message. And
so the whole of the European Union is going to be doing this?
Exactly.
There is agreement on that already?
Yeah. It's already signed, so people know. Okay. And that's why all the European manufacturers have a good visibility on the timeline, how they need to do things. But at the same time, they may be caught by the two other sides of the world, or big side of the world, the US on one side and China on the other. They don't have those strict rules, and they can adapt differently based on what will happen. If in the end, I don't know, things change and we find new technologies to remove CO2 from the air, and we see that we can keep burning fuel or create synthetic fuels and so on, and the US and China not that much, because they're not good on the internal combustion engine, but the US would be able to switch very quickly. We wouldn't. Anyways, that's about regulation. And I forgot what this was coming from.
No, we were talking about, I think, you were saying that Europe is not in a very good place because of
and the CO2 one, that's what I wanted to know. The two bigger polluters in the world are the US and China. And they are the ones that take the smallest, to say really no big commitments at all. And in Europe, we put ourselves a lot of stress saying we need to pollute less, those are the new rules, we need to comply and so on. Our impact is going to be how much, what's our share? Probably a fourth of what they are.
Very small.
So,
okay.
And by pushing that so hard on us, we're creating a big disruption that maybe at some point we could have a very leading EV technology, for instance, industry. But so far, it doesn't seem that is the case. Like they are even, probably not the US, but the Chinese are better.
Really good in EVs.
Ones.
Okay.
Who knows?
It's going to be an interesting
be careful
sector to follow.
Regulation on how hard we give that example.
Mm-hmm.
We expect, I think Europe expect that by doing that thing, we step forward and we're the first ones to take all those commitments that the Chinese and the Americans will follow. But so far, it's not the case.
Okay. Denis, on a more personal level, what inspired you to join this exciting intersection between finance and sustainability and ESG?
So I will probably the answer is that nothing specific. Like I was just in there and it came to me.
Okay.
So it's an interesting topic, and when it comes around and those teams are created within the company and they need to work with someone in finance, they need a finance partner, like
yes,
to fund those teams and to work with them on what are those projects that can be good from an ESG perspective and from a business one. Yes, you're there to help them, but it really came to me. I was not the one pushing, saying, "Oh, we should do this," and we should. I want to be the one leading it. So it came to me. It's interesting.
It was an opportunity that presented.
Interesting, but either way, it's probably in the future, like most people will be exposed to it. Today, not that much.
It's still rather new for many people, but it will not become new anymore in the next few years, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Well, would you like to add anything? I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and it was a very exciting discussion, and we've learned a lot of things related to ESG. But would you like to end on something specific?
On ESG, maybe one positive thing, and I think when I look back at the hole in the ozone layer, when was that? In the 70s, 80s?
Yeah, in the 80s, 90s, it was, people used to talk a lot about that. Yes,
exactly. There was this hole and say, "Oh, we're getting burnt. There's no the sunlight is not getting filtered anymore. It's a real risk for the planet." When that happens, and you see that in the end, all countries manage to align and to agree on something, and you see like 20 years down the road or 30 years down the road that yes, it had an impact and that hole is disappearing. That gives you a good hope, saying we will be able to do it again. We will be able to adapt. Maybe China and the US will take a bit longer to really step in, but as the problem becomes more visible and more damaging for them, and they see the business opportunity behind the revolution of,
they will catch up.
They will do it. They will step in. The problem is that they're fighting each other, and no one wants to step back first because probably can give you a bit of an advantage to the other. The benefit from the old system a bit longer. But I think I believe in mankind, and I think we'll be able to solve that.
For sure. I also truly believe that the long-term and general awareness about everything linked to the environment and ESG is going to prevail in the end, because there is no denying forests are disappearing. Mm. We do feel global warming. I mean, I live currently in Canada here. Today is the first day of snow. And I used to hear stories that 20 years back, it was totally different. So there's probably something happening along the lines of global warming. And it'll take time, but for sure, I'm aligned with what you think as well, that eventually everybody's going to catch up, and they will try to kind of marry business and good business practices as well.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Denis.
It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you.
Likewise.
See you soon for another podcast.
For sure, yeah. I'm all for round 2 at one point. Maybe you can give us later on an update on what's happening, and then
yes. But that's gonna take a long time.
it's gonna take some time.
Yes, so probably choose another topic.
We have a long list, I guess, that we can choose from. So thank you again, and see you very soon. Bye bye.